Okay, so we can go over this. Oh my goodness. I started it too early, right? We can go over this super quickly because the poster does go into a lot of detail. But to start off, my disease was neurofibromatosis, and there's 3 types. Neurofibromatosis type 1 is categorized by bumps under and in the skin, and those bumps are tumors caused by unregulated cell growth. This unregulated cell growth comes from the RAS pathway. But before we get into that, you have to look into the specific gene mutation that causes neurofibromatosis. I can't say it, type 1, right? That gene would be the NF1 gene because this gene codes for the protein neurofibromin. And you may ask, well, why is that protein important? Neurofibromin is a GTPase activating protein, which means that it hydrolyzes GTP and it inactivates the G protein that it is bound to. We see more over here what that means. G protein, which in this case is our RAS protein, is always in a cyclic on and off cycle. So when it is bound to GDP, it is inactive. But when you go through a phosphorylation process due to a GEF, like, helping that phosphorylation process, that G protein activates and it is now bound to GTP, which can allow the signal transduction pathway that it is working in to continue and to allow cell proliferation, right? But neurofibromin, it is a GAP. It is a GTPase activating protein, which means it turns GTP, it hydrolyzes GTP, and it inactivates the protein, and it inactivates RAS in this case. Which is super important because that means that it regulates this amount of signals that RAS can send out, kind of. You get what I mean. Where was I? Oh, I explained the RAS protein. The RAS pathway, the one that we're going to be looking over right now, is the ERK pathway, which is what I learned is more of the common name. Here in this pathway, you can see that the G protein RAS is like one of the first ones. And then here, the GTP to GDP, you can see the cyclic cycle of it turning on and off and on and off. And when you have neurofibromin, it will hydrolyze GTP, and again, your RAS protein will be inactive, which means that none of the rest of the cycle will go on. Yeah. Is that it for type 1? Oh, well, I mean, type 1 is you not having enough of that protein because your gene that makes that protein, the NF1 gene over here, it mutates, meaning it doesn't do its function correctly. And when you do not have enough of neurofibromin, this cycle will not be regulated, so it will constantly be in an active state. So when a ligand comes in and binds to this receptor and this process goes on and then there is no GDP, it's just always active, then it will be unregulated proliferation. My hands look weird. And that's kind of the point of neurofibromatosis type 1. Because of its cyclic cycle and its affinity to GTP and GDP, RAS is a really, really hard protein to target with drugs. So far there is not a good, or not like a stable medication that you can take for this disease. And then here are my sources for all of that. Okay, the second one is neurofibromatosis type 2, which is, well, I mean, it's not the same at all, honestly. One of the biggest things is while this protein was on chromosome number 17, neurofibromatosis type 2 and schwannomatosis are both on gene 22, which is, totally different. Not gene, chromosome 22. What was I doing? Oh, neurofibromatosis type 2 is mostly seen with vestibular schwannomas on both ears. Like, that is the main symptom that they look for. And because, well, I didn't explain it. A schwannoma is a tumor that is on a nerve, basically. And this schwannoma, when it is on the ear nerve, it is called an acoustic neuroma because it is on, the acoustic nerve, right? But this specific schwannoma is what they look for because it is one of the main indicators of neurofibromatosis type 2. This variant of the disease is caused by the NF2 gene or a mutation in the NF2 gene because this gene codes for the protein Merlin. And Merlin is an inhibitor. It inhibits something that activates, how do I say this? It activates, I want to say PIC. I know it's not, the real name is phosphodienosteroid 3 kinase. I don't really know how to shorten that, so we're going to say PIC for now because that's what it looks like to me. Yeah, PIC. Anyways, it inhibits this, which stops pike L from binding to PIC. And when PIC is not binded to, it is not activated, which means that this doesn't happen. So, like, cell growth is turned off for that pathway. Dun, 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 dun. Oh my gosh. What's they doing? Oh, this kind of just goes more in depth into the pathway. PIC has 2 subunits. Yeah, subunits. PIC has 2 subunits. And this one here, the P85, is a regulatory subunit, while the P110 is a catalytic subunit. And then pike L kind of, it binds like in this process, but when Merlin binds to it, this process just doesn't happen. So it doesn't even get to the secondary messengers over here, which means that AKT never gets the message, which means that none of this happens, which is why it's super important for Merlin to exist, because again, it is stopping or regulating cell growth, right? And again, like NF1, there are no established drugs that can completely cure it, but they are targeting the signaling pathway, which is really hard because what the hell? How? I'm already 8 minutes in. My cat opened my garage door. Okay. Schwannomatosis is the 3rd variant of this, and it is a genetic disorder characterized by multiple tumors. It is, again, it's on the same chromosome. The problem is on the same chromosome as NF2, so it does share a lot of similarities with NF2. But if a family member close to the patient has NF2, or if they have too many symptoms of NF2, then no one's going to diagnose you with schwannomatosis because it's just going to be NF2. Schwannomatosis is more just, it's tumors on nerves, but they're not in your skin or on your skin, and they're not on your ear, like where you would find them in NF2. I put the research over here because the other 2 pages were completely taken up. But like it says here, it's also really hard do to target this pathway, but there has been evidence. I don't know how to explain it. I can write, I can explain. Oh my gosh. Well, yeah. The RAS MAPK. What I mean here is not that the activation of this pathway plays a role in regulating schwannoma, like in a good way, but the activation of this pathway plays a role in worsening schwannoma, which means that if there is more, because it was the first one, so if there was more of the neurofibromin, which again inhibits the RAS pathway, then it does play a role over here in schwannomatosis, which would lower the damage done by the tumors. It was a really interesting read because they did it on mice, and they showed pictures of the mice who had who had neurofibromin, and then the mice who didn't have neurofibromin, and then nothing was changed besides the amount of neurofibromin they had. And of course, they were both infected. Both mice were infected with schwannomatosis, and the ones who had neurofibromin, they lived the full 180 days, I want to say, of the experiment, and they had a little bit of tumors coming out of it. But the ones who didn't have enough neurofibromin or had a lot less neurofibromin, they completely died out around the 60-80 day mark, and they died out a lot, were looking a lot worse than the other mice did. So it was really informational, because neurofibromin has a huge impact on schwannomatosis, which is super weird considering that the genes known for schwannomatosis are the LZTR1 gene and this SMARCB1 gene, but I spent hours looking for the pathways or anything that like is specific to those genes that could cause schwannomatosis. But every article I read said it doesn't, there is not enough evidence to link them to a specific thing, which was really not cool to read because I spent a lot of time on that. But like we said over here, the RAS and how did she get in? I'll get her out right now. The RAS and MAPK signal pathway did play a big part, and as you can read, what are these called? Oh, other regulators that can suppress tumor growth, such as the LATS1 and the LATS2, when they were gone completely, they also cause schwannomatosis. And you can see over here why that would happen, because the LATS1 and 2, when they're active, when they have a phosphate on them, they give that phosphate to YAP and TAZ, which are both transactival coactivators. But when they have a phosphate on them, instead of being activated, they want to say they're inactivated. Yes, they're inactivated, they're inhibited. And that leads to protosomal degradation, which you can see right over here, which means that they won't code for cellular growth, or proliferation. But when LATS1 and LATS2 are inactive, which means they do not have a phosphate to them, YAP and TAZ are never inhibited, so they translate into the they translate into the cell, into the nucleus, and they bind to a gene expressor or transcription factor, and then that expresses the genes needed for cell proliferation. And then of course these are my sources. This is a 14-minute video. I wasn't able to explain it very well at all, honestly, but I think that my writing did a little bit better. I apologize. I keep stopping because I don't know how my cats open my garage door. But yeah, that's my video.